MTS Tayeb, thank you. In this edition of 2020 Daily Trail Markers, former Vice President Joe Biden ratcheted up his attacks on Senator Elizabeth Warren's credibility on Wednesday, one day after the fourth Democratic debate. Ed O'Keefe reports on the campaign's sudden change.
It's kind of about time other people get questioned.
Joe Biden acknowledged today that it's newly minted frontrunner Elizabeth Warren, not him, who took most of the heat at last night's debate. Instead of being the candidate taking the hits, now he's delivering them, specifically blasting this Warren comment on foreign policy.
I think that we ought to get out of the Middle East.
I hope she didn't mean in a literal sense, because if it would be, I think, a disaster for American security.
Warren later clarified she meant combat troops. Biden's on the offensive because he now trails Warren in early primary states and some national polls. His fundraising also lags other contenders, and he continues facing questions about his son's business dealings in Ukraine.
She's going to have to tell the truth.
Biden and others questioned Warren's credibility for refusing to say how she'd pay for her Medicare for All plan.
Your signature, Senator, is to have a plan for everything, except this.
At least Bernie's being honest here and saying how he's going to pay for this.
But Warren insists the wealthy and big corporations will pay.
I will not sign a bill into law that does not lower costs for middle-class families.
Warren took her own shot at Biden, refusing to give him credit for helping launch the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, an agency she first proposed and later led.
I went on the floor and got you votes. I got votes for that bill.
I am deeply grateful to President Obama, who fought so hard to make sure that agency was passed into law.
CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins me now from Davenport, Iowa. Ed, candidates revealed their third quarter FEC filings Wednesday. Former Vice President Joe Biden raised $15.7 million in the third quarter. He spent almost $18 million. That leaves him with nearly $9 million cash on hand. How does that compare to his rivals, and what does it indicate about the future of his campaign?
Well, it puts him in fourth place, Elaine, at least in the money race. Bernie Sanders has more than $33 million in the bank. Elizabeth Warren had a little more than $25 million, followed by Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Doesn't necessarily end things for him by any means, doesn't disqualify him, doesn't force him to start making some real big cutbacks in any way. But what it does demonstrate is that, as you mentioned, he's spending more than he's raising. That could be potentially a long-term problem for him. Part of the reason he struggles and trails so badly compared to his other rivals is two things. One, in the case of Warren, she transferred at least $10 million, give or take, from her Senate re-election campaign that she held last year into a presidential account this year. So she started with a huge advantage. But the other thing that Warren, Sanders, Buttigieg, and many others are doing that Biden is not is relying almost exclusively on people who give in small amounts. $5, $15, $50. These are the kinds of people across the country who can be called upon throughout a primary campaign to give repeatedly. Biden, instead, holds private fundraising events where most of his supporters max out and can't give to him again unless or until he's the general election nominee.
So, Ed, what is the Biden campaign telling you tonight about the position the former vice president is in?
Well, look, they are acknowledging the fact that Warren now is either nipping at their heels or in the lead in some states. But the position the former vice president will take is this. If he believes that Warren continues to not answer specific questions on how she would pay for and implement her health care plan, he will more aggressively raise questions about her candor and go more directly at her motivations and why it is she's talking about a health care plan that she refuses to engage on the specifics. Beyond that, though, he will continue to keep the focus on President Trump. Here tonight in Davenport, he gave a speech where he lit into the president for his foreign policy, specifically what's happened in the last 2 weeks in Turkey and Syria, raised doubts about the engagement with Iran, and raised concerns about ongoing talks with the North Koreans. All of it designed to remind voters that Biden is someone uniquely positioned and experienced when it comes to foreign affairs, having spent decades in the Senate working on foreign policy and 8 years alongside Barack Obama.
Well, the Democratic debate wrapped up less than 24 hours ago. Tell us who's already out there campaigning again in Iowa.
Well, as we mentioned, Biden's here today. He heads back to Washington tomorrow for a big party fundraiser. Kamala Harris, who has said she's moving to Iowa and is spending a majority of her October in the state, is here tonight as well, as is Mayor Buttigieg, who is currently, at least according to our polling, 4th in the state and hoping to climb higher. Senator Warren will be here over the weekend for a series of events in the Des Moines area. Elaine?